Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the Haralson bag sew along. We're going to be finishing the bag today. There really isn't too many steps left. I think the majority of the parts you assembled last time in part 1. But today the video might be a little longer because I'm going to show you the 3 different closure options. So for the bag that I had sewn in part 1 that I was working on, if you remember those fabrics, with that I'm going to show the leather and hardware closure. And then I've worked through a couple more bags. So this one is going to be, this is a green cotton twill and a really pretty like micro stripe chambray type fabric as the lining, and that I'm going to install the Loxx fastener on. And then the last bag that I put together is this is a, I believe it's cotton linen, but it feels like it has a ton of linen in it because it's really wiggly. Just testing it out to see how it goes. I think it'll work well, but that's a Nani Eero textile. So that's just what that is. So there's the front, and then this is the lining for that one. That's Alexia Abeg is, that's her design for the lining. And with that one, I'm going to install a turn lock. So those are the 3 closure options we'll go over in today's video. And yeah, I think we should just get started. Okay, so for the first step in today's video, we're going to take the main panels. This is my exterior and my lining, and we're just going to place them right sides together, and then we're going to sew along that top curved edge. Okay, so now that's sewn, I'm just going to use my pinking shears and trim that edge, that seam allowance. And then we're going to turn it so that the fabrics are wrong sides together. So what I like to do is just kind of align that bottom edge first. So the lining edge is aligned to this exterior edge. And then I use my finger to kind of crawl up that stitching line so that that curve kind of really comes out nicely. And then just press. And then we're going to take it over to the machine and top stitch along that curved edge. Okay, so now that we have that top stitch, we're ready to install the hardware. On this one, I'm doing the leather and hardware closure, and then I'll go through each of the other options as well. But we'll start here with the leather. We're going to grab the smaller of the two, the shorter of the 2 pieces of leather here. That's the bottom or lower closure here that we're going to install. And this leather I do like because it is a nice flexible leather. It just is going to sit really nicely in your bag, and it's not too thick or stiff. So just keep that in mind when selecting your leather. But first I'm going to thread on this 3/4 inch D-ring and just bend that leather back on itself by about 1 inch. And then I'm going to use my hole puncher and punch a hole through both of those layers. So there's that hole punched. And then we're going to just place it centered along this bottom edge here. And I'm going to use that hole that I punched. Just make sure to get the holes aligned here. I'm going to use that hole to make a marking on my fabric. Okay, so that's the center marking there. And then I'm going to take my hole punch again, and keeping both those layers together, I'm just going to punch a hole through both of them. So I put lotion on, so it's like so slippery. Note to self, don't put lotion on. Okay, so then that hole is punched through both the exterior and the lining. Just going to position this back in place. And I'm going to take my rivet. It's got the 2 parts here. And I'm going to put the post through this front side. And then through the fabric, and secure this at the back. Okay, there's that. And then I'm going to press that rivet in place with my hand press. And if you're using a Chicago screw, it's the same process. Punch the hole, put the post through, and then you would just screw that Chicago screw on through the back. Okay, so now that's secured, I'm going to jump over to my other bag because we're going to install the other kind of hardware here. Just set those other pieces aside. We'll do the Loxx next. So this is my front panel piece. Grab my hardware here. So this is the Loxx that comes with the 4 parts, and this is the key. This is the tool that allows you to tighten the Loxx together. So this measurement is in the pattern. I'm just going to find the center here. I don't recommend overfilling this type of bag, but if you're the type of person that likes to pack a full bag, this measurement can be adjusted a bit. You can just move it up. Keep in mind that when you're not carrying as much, the flap may be a little more loose, so just something to be aware of. 2.5 inches down from that top stitched edge there from the fold of the fabric. So that's my marking. And then I like to use one of the washers so that I am going to trace the inner diameter of that circle onto the fabric. And that is my marking for cutting the hole. So I would just recommend a really sharp scissors. And again, we're going to be treating this lining and exterior together as one because I'm going to fasten the Loxx through both layers. I think that gives it an extra layer of security, and the back of the Loxx is like a finished, if you see it on the inside of this, in the bag here, it is a great finished look. It doesn't look, it's not like a pronged turn lock where you're going to want to have that installed between the layers. This doesn't have to be perfect. You could do a little seam sealant here if you're worried about anything fraying at all. But this is the part of the Loxx, this guy with the little ball on the end. He's going to come through. And then we're going to tighten the washer over the top. So I just like to start it with my fingers first. And that's where they get the key. There's these 2 little holes, and you just tighten that down. I'm holding the washer or the other part at the back just to so that it doesn't swivel around. So once that's secure, that's what that'll look like. And then the back is like this. So it's a nice finished look, and it's really nice and stable. So that's the Loxx on this part of it. And so we've got the 2 other pieces, the washer and the top button, to install on the flap, and that will wait till the very end. Moving on to the turn lock closure, if you're wanting to do the turn lock. It's a similar process as the Loxx. If you're used to magnetic snaps, a turn lock is really quite similar. Okay, so here's the turn lock. It's got the 2 parts. This is going to be on the flap, these 2 pieces, and this is the pronged part that's going to go through this front panel here. That's the part that just turns to close the lock. And so with that, the prongs are going to situate through this metal washer. And there's also a couple screws through this one. There's going to be 2 screws that go through the upper part on the flap. So this is similar to a magnetic snap. We're just going to make the same marking as we did for the Loxx. I'm going to find the center and then measure down and make a mark. I don't recommend overfilling this type of bag, but if you're the type of person that likes to pack a full bag, this measurement can be adjusted a bit. You can just move it up. Keep in mind that when you're not carrying as much, the flap may be a little more loose, so just something to be aware of. Okay, so there's my center marking, and I'm going to take the turning mechanism here, and I'm just gonna, so it's gonna sit right over that marking. So these little prongs need holes to go through the fabric, and I'm just going to transfer those markings using that as a guide. So I've got the two markings here. That's where I'm going to cut through the fabric, but for the turn lock, since the back is not a finished look, it's going to have this washer on it. You're going to want to just go through the exterior fabric. So don't cut through the lining, just the exterior. So I've got my hand under there, separated that out, and I'm just going to cut. And so we've got the prongs, and I'm just going to insert those through. You could use fray check if you wanted. So this is the back side. If your fabric is a little lighter weight, even though we have a couple layers of interfacing already on, it might not hurt to grab a scrap of interfacing. I have just a drawer full of scraps just for this purpose. So I'm just going to grab a little rectangle here, cut little slits through it, and put that on before. Okay, so then that interfacing is on, and then I'm just going to slide my washer over the top, and I'm going to bend my prongs inward. You could do them outward. I don't know if there's a right or wrong way. This way feels pretty secure to me. And then if you wanted, you could again take another piece of fusible interfacing would be great for here, this fusible woven, and just fuse it over the whole top here. Okay, so that's what the turn lock looks like installed on this front panel. So there's the front, and then I'll open up in between. And here's the fusible woven over the top. So once the pieces are together, you're not going to see that back side. So that looks really nice and clean. So that's that. I'm just going to use my glue stick again, and I'm going to secure these corners together. So we're going to put some glue on the wrong side of this lining piece, and then just press those corners together. Okay, so now we're in the spot in the pattern we're going to make those fun corners. If you have the PDF, there's already a video specifically on the corners. We're just going to go over it here again just to be a complete sew through, but that's in a little gray box at the bottom of page 10, I believe. So if you just wanted to, if you're going along, maybe you're sewing your second one and you just wanted to get to that part, that's a great place to go. Just click that link right as you have it open in Acrobat. Okay, so this corner is just made up of a couple different folds. And the first step, if you recall, we did the glue. So this corner is glued together, so they're treated as one. So first step is we're going to match this edge here with this edge here. So we're going to just bring that up right sides together, and then I just hold it in place with my finger, and then we're going to bring this edge, this bottom raw edge here, back down so that the linings are right sides together. And then I'm just going to put a little clip in to hold it in place. And like I said before in the other video, if these bottom fabrics are a little goofy on this little corner here, it's okay. The seam line is actually way up here in the corner, so it's going to look great no matter how you have this little bottom edge. And again, we're going to do the same part for the other corner. So I'm just going to bring the edges of this cutout right sides together, hold it with my finger, and then I'm going to bring this bottom edge, this bottom raw edge, back down. And again, just clip it in place. Okay, so that's going to make these corners a 90-degree corner. And this folded edge, this little fold that we created, that's going to be facing toward these sides. Okay, and that's just how that'll look. It's going to have this bulge in the center. That's how the bag creates some depth. If it was straight across, you're not going to be able to reach in and out of your bag very easy. So that's how that's going to look. And I'm just gonna zoom in and do the corner one more time. So we're gonna bring these fabrics, this exterior fabric, right sides together, matching this corner. Okay, and I'm just gonna hold my finger there. And then this bottom raw edge, we're just gonna bring that back down. The linings will be right sides together. And I'm just gonna place a clip. And then I'm gonna go ahead and baste that in place just along that bottom edge right there. And then that's the same for this other corner. So just baste along that bottom edge. Okay, so this next step of attaching the front panel to the main interior panel, that's a separate video as well in the pattern. So if you just wanted to watch that step anytime in the future, that is also a little gray box on page 10 as well. And you would just click that when you're in Acrobat to open that up. But we'll just go through it again here. Again, this piece, this edge, this bottom edge is going to match the bottom edge of your main interior panel. So this is my main interior panel, got the zipper all in there, and those edges are going to be the same width at the bottom here. So then I'm going to I like to match those bottom corners together to start, and I'm just going to clip those in place. And then the sides might look a little goofy at this point, but we're just going to swivel them to match the straight edge along here of the main interior panel. And we're going to baste this together right along each side, the bottom edge and up the other side. So yeah, that's what that'll look like. The linings will be right sides together. All right, we've got the front panel all attached to the main interior panel, and then we're going to do the next step, which is grab our assembled exterior back, and we're just going to place it right sides down on top of that. Okay, so we're going to be aligning all the edges here, and if your exterior back edge hangs down a little bit, so that's mainly if you're off on your seam allowances here, or if you're using a slightly wider zipper, you might have a little bit of a sliver of fabric to trim off of that edge. So you'd want to trim it off your exterior back edge. I'm just going to go ahead and line everything up and pin it together. Okay, so now that's all pinned. I just like to make a mark here. I'm going to kind of look through the layers, and this is just so I can note where the pivot point is. So I've got this is my front panel. That's the curved one that we just did the corners on. And I'm just going to make a mark right where that seam allowance is, just above where I can feel through to that front panel on each side here. That's a spot where I'm going to pivot with the needle down. So it's just easier to mark it ahead of time, and it'll be nice and even on both sides there. Okay, so then we're going to take it over to the machine, and I'm going to leave a 5-inch opening on the top edge. Now, you could leave the entire edge open, especially if you're using maybe like a cork, if you're using something super heavy, anything that might give you trouble for turning it right side out. But with like this layer of fabrics, this is enough for me to just do the 5-inch opening. Just keep that in mind. So I'm going to start here, so over, down, pivot at that marking, and then continue sewing around back to this upper edge here. And you could here at the opening, just to secure those fabrics, just pivot here and sew right to the raw edge and backstitch. You can just go back in if you forgot to, and also just sew this side. That's also going to help if you're really pulling at the fabric while turning it right side out. That's going to help prevent those stitches from pulling out too. And just clip your corners. And then I like to get in here, in between these layers. And trim away at this bottom little corner, that extra folded edge. That's just going to help take some of the bulk out of it. You could remove some of these basting stitches too, so that you're not clipping the lining as well, but I think it's fine just to do both. So that's what that'll look like. And then we'll go and turn it right side out. And here is where I like to reach in between the layers and just use my thumb to really push that corner out. So that's what that corner looks like. And then again, I just use my finger to kind of like run along the seam line here. Okay, so that's what that looks like. And I'm just going to take it over to the iron and I'm going to press this edge under and get that all set to go for the top stitching on the next step. Okay, so I've got that those raw edges tucked in, and I'm just going to start by sliding over this front panel so I can kind of get in there with my sewing machine, get my presser foot in there. Kind of take it from behind here and just make it as flat as I can so that I can get the bag underneath. So I've just got that front panel slid over there, and I'm just going to make sure my top stitching length is about a 3, and I can just start with a couple little back stitches and then stitch down the side, across, and over the other side. And again, when I'm coming down this side, I'm just going to move this, what's the front panel, kind of slide that over. Okay, so I've got all 3 bags ready to go. They're all top stitched along the flap there. And we're going to work on putting the hardware on. So there's that and the last one. I'm just going to set those aside. We'll start with the leather closure. This is the remaining leather piece for that. That's the upper closure or top closure. And we're just going to make a few markings on this strip, and those are noted in the pattern. I'm just going to use a pen because I'm going to be punching holes through it anyway. Okay, so then I'm going to have 4 markings, and I'm going to punch along each of those holes. All right, so now those are punched. I'm just going to grab my 3/4 inch swivel clasp here, and I'm just going to thread that on. Get that ready. Okay, so I'm just going to find the center of the flap. Probably easiest just to make a little crease mark here. So that's my center, and then I'm just going to make a vertical line on the flap, just with my pen here. Just make sure it's square to the flap. That'll be about 2 inches long. And then what I'm going to do is just make sure that this has got the holes aligned. And then I'm going to sandwich the leather around this flap. And I'm going to make sure that the hardware is snug up to the fabric. So I'm going to make sure that that's there. And I'm going to kind of peek through those holes. You probably cannot see that very well on video, but I can see through those holes where there's going to be the line that I had marked. So I'm just going to make sure that I mark each hole. And those are my markings where I'm going to punch a hole. And that goes through both layers. All right, so I've punched the holes, and then I'm going to grab my remaining 2 sets of rivets here, or your Chicago screws if you're doing Chicago screws. And I'm going to put the post through the first side of the leather here, and then just push those rivet posts through the holes I punched, and then get that together there. Make sure the post is coming through, and put the back cap on. So that's how that'll look. And then I'm going to take it over and press the rivets in place. And if you're using Chicago screws, you're going to have the screw end on the back here and just screw those in place with the small screwdriver. Okay, so those rivets are in place, and then that's just where you go ahead and clasp it. All right, so next is the Loxx fastener. I'm just going to go in the same order as before, and again, I'm going to put it on top here. Again, find the center. And I'm just going to make a mark 3/4 of an inch from that finished edge. And I'm going to use the washer just like I did before and trace that inner circle. And then I'm going to again cut through both layers, so you're going to want to punch through both layers. If you have a punch that size, you can do that, but a sharp scissors works great too. I used really tiny snips, if you noticed, to get that circle. It's easier to make the circle bigger, of course, if you need to, instead of the opposite, which that doesn't work very well. So this is the little finished front button. And I'm just going to push that through the hole. So that's that. And then I've got the washer. I'm just going to thread that on. And I just like to make sure that this Loxx name is, see that little brand name, that's facing down. Again, just like before, I'm going to hold this component, this bottom half, in place while I tighten. Okay, so that's the Loxx. And this has a mechanism in it that, hopefully I can get it a little close up. You're just pulling this upper half. Do you see how that moves there? And that's what releases this ball. So that's what makes it really secure. Also, it's super easy to close and open. So there's that. And next we'll work on the turn lock. So grab your upper half of your turn lock here, the 2 plates. And this comes with 3 screws, but you'll only need 2 unless you lose one, then you'll have an extra. Just going to mark the center here. And then I do the same thing. I use this little component here, and I'm going to trace that opening. First get my marking up here. Now if you wanted, you could definitely slide this closer to the edge. I just feel like this looks like a good space. Just going to trace that inner circle. And then again, we're just going to cut through all layers. And just make sure, like, of course, anytime you're cutting through your fabric, just make sure it looks right. Like if you have it centered or not, you could even take your ruler and just make sure you've got it centered looking. Yeah, so that looks good to me. And then just cut that hole. All right, so then I'm going to just kind of keep continuing to make sure that that's going to fit. And then the other thing I like to do with this one is line it up nice and square over that cut opening, and then I'm going to use my pencil to make a mark in each of the screw holes. And then I like to use my hole punch just to punch through where those screws are going to go. Depending on your hardware, yours might have screws that just kind of drill through the fabric. This is just the way I do it for this particular one. So do whatever works best for you. And then I'm just going to make sure that those line up. And you just sandwich that around the back there. I'm going to take a little more off that top edge. And then I've got my little screws here. And I keep this tiny little screwdriver on my work table just for this purpose. And before I tighten it too far, I'm going to put the other one in. And then just snug them both down. Okay, so that's the turn lock installed. Okay, so we're all finished with our bags. We went through all the different hardware closures, the final steps, and yeah, I think it turned out really well. I'm super pleased with how they look. Here's with the leather and hardware closure. Just probably going to add some zipper pulls on there. Here's this linen blend one with the turn lock. There's the back. The little corners. Turn lock. And here is the twill one. I really like how this twill turned out. Okay, your Haralson bag is complete. I hope you had fun sewing along. I hope you enjoy using your bag, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.